What is going on, golf fans? It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting live stream for this week's Cognizant Classic. I was real close to saying Honda Classic. Heck, it's been that for the last 3 or 4 decades, but excited to hop into this week and a slightly looking different golf course. A lot of things are very typical PGA National, but there were a few differences I saw out there in 2024 that might have a small little impact or two on how this course is going to play. But in general, just excited for our betting and our DFS exposure this week. You're going to go over everything that you need to know to go out there and get your research finished, I should say, right? We're here on a Wednesday. Of course, on Mondays, right, we're diving on into it. But at this point, we're going to try and put a bow on everything. So we'll talk about all those last second things that you need to know, including the weather, ownership for large field GPPs to help you go out there and make those decisions. So first off, welcome into chat, everybody. We got Kevin down there finally making a live stream live. We'd love to see it. Why I Win down there, who also says nice reporting from the grounds. Appreciate that, man. And yeah, excited to bring you guys a few of the things that I saw out there. I was trying to notice things that were important, right? Especially about the setup. And I think we found a thing or two. So we made it a productive business trip, definitely a write-off. I'm out here with an independent contractor like myself. So we'll take it, right? A little tax write-off for a day out on the golf course, walking and watching golf, right? You can't hate that at all. It's always a good thing. Hey, Luke, in 3Max, how do you attack roster construction? We'll talk about that a little bit later. I think we're jumping the gun a little bit on that question, but we'll touch on that for sure. The single entry, smaller field stuff. What's going on? Barry definitely likes Badalay this week, he's saying. Yeah, where's Mondo at? Mondo's definitely going to let us know about Badalay later. I think it's a pretty good course for him. CD Minwoo, didn't see him out there, but he was probably out there at some point, just didn't cross my path. You play multiple single entries. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. You're going to have boots on the ground this week. That's right. Me all weekend long. So not just for today. I'll be there for the 4 days. Might be useful, right? As long as you guys ask the right questions, they get all the information that you need. So what's going on, Jack? Good evening. Says thoughts on Svensson. He also played well at the Honda there. So Corn Ferry Tour event, I'm not so sure about. I don't know that myself, but I know that a few years ago at the Honda, he nearly won the thing. So definitely at least has that course history to go off of. The Luke Classic is now upon us. I love it, Brant. Welcome on in, buddy. And let's get this thing started. So in terms of the golf course, let's just start with what I saw today, right? Get it off the bat. If you're watching this on replay, make the information as accessible as possible. And it was a few out of bounds stakes. Really the only difference, the greens looked about as receptive as they normally are. The fairways were rolling out a little bit, which is always the case on a Florida course. They're not rock hard though, right? So you're not going to get like 30, 40 yards of rollout, but you'll get like 10, 15, like you see at most of these courses down there. The real difference was the out of bounds stakes. So in hole number 10, they have out of bounds on both sides of the fairway. And in fact, off the left side, it's like 7 yards off the fairway. So if you even miss in the left rough, I'd say it's like a 30, 40% chance that you're going to hit it out of bounds. And then on the right side, because it's a par 5 now and they've moved back the tee box, let me go ahead and just bring up the PGA site actually and show you guys a little overhead view of the hole. It's going to be wild at hole number 10. And by wild, I mean a huge distribution of scores. We are going to see doubles, triples made at that hole, and probably a bunch of eagles this week because in the past, right, this was a par 4. It's only about 20 yards longer than what it used to play. And guys were making birdies there, right? Not a ton of birdies. It was your most difficult hole on the golf course, but like 10, maybe 12% every single day. So you're going to see a lot of guys making a 3 here. What makes it interesting and why it's going to be absolute chaos, I mean, it could be crazy out there, is you have that OB down the left. You see that cart path? It's actually out of bounds just outside of that. So you can see, right, there's only about maybe a yard of room until you get out of bounds. And then on the right side, you also have out of bounds just over a little cart path. And what makes this one on the right especially devilish is that there's actually a little bit of a hill there. All of the mounding goes towards the out of bounds. And essentially, if you miss the ball, it's a little bit more room on the right side, right? You probably have like 20, maybe 22 yards out there to the right. There's a bunch of trees there too. So if you hit it over there on that right side, you're going to be pitching out because of the palm trees. Or if you get through the palm trees, you're going to end up with an out of bounds shot and re-teeing. So hole number 10, if you hit the fairway, you're definitely birdieing that hole unless you completely shit the bed. But if you miss the fairway, you might be trying to look at a double at best. So it's going to be a fun one. That was the huge main difference that I saw. A few other holes like hole 13. Actually, shout out to Sepp Straka's caddy. Came through today and actually introduced himself to me and let me pick his brain there for a minute. So I asked him about the golf course. He said very typical setup. Obviously, he asked if I knew about the change on 10. And then afterwards, he said that there's a lot more risk reward this year. So what he was mentioning is that some of the out of bounds stakes have been brought a little bit more into play. A few of the water hazards, particularly on the back nine, have also been, brought a little bit more into play because rather than having like a 7 to 8 yard barrier of rough, especially on the holes, like I think it's 13 and 14 in particular, where you see this aspect coming in, they brought the out of bounds closer to the course, which I'm not sure how that works, right? Maybe the homeowners purchased a little bit of land there, but on the other side where the water is, right? So there's out of bounds on one side, there's water on the other side. The side with the water, they shaved down the grass. So it's no longer rough right up until that aquatic penalty area. And now you're going to get guys that hit the fairway and bounce into the water. So to me, it looks like they're trying to make it a little bit more accessible, right? With the extra par 5, but at the same time, they're looking to punish players even more than usual. So I think that off the tee is going to play a huge factor. And a lot of that's going to come down to luck, right? I mean, there are a few shots where you can hit the fairways around this track and then bounce into water and take a penalty, or, hit it just slightly offline and end up out of bounds. It's why chalk ends up dying at this course. So if you're somebody that wants to play a whole lot of chalk this week, I would say that setup makes that an even less feasible thing, right? If you're going to get just unlucky bounces and end up having to take penalties, well, you don't want to be playing guys that are 25, 30% owned when absolutely everyone's going to get shafted, right? And essentially your winners, your top 10, top 15 finishers are either guys that strategically kept themselves out of trouble or just got lucky, right? Didn't have those bounces into the hazards. So it's that kind of week. It's a week to avoid the chalk. And based on some of the setup things that I saw and what I heard from Sepp's caddy, it looks like that's even more so the case this week. So keep that in mind. The whole 10 thing, I think, is a great example of how they're doing that this year. But there are, at least according to Sepp, I didn't walk the whole course, right? I don't have a caddy's eye. I'm not going to be able to point out the same kind of things as somebody like him, a trained eye, is going to. But that's what he saw out there. And obviously with, I think it was like a top 5 finish last year, a win the time before that, and he was on the bag for both of them. I think he knows what the hell he's talking about. So I'm going to trust him there. Definitely saw that in a hole number 10. But in terms of weather, tomorrow early on looks beautiful. It looks like we're going to have next to no wind out there for Thursday. In the afternoon, kicks up a little bit more, right? Closer to like 8 to 10 miles an hour. But today it was out there at a solid 10 to 15 sustained. You had 25, sometimes even like 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And the players didn't look all that affected by it, right? I was watching some of the play out there. They were still hitting greens, still hitting it to like 15, 20 feet. Tomorrow morning, though, when we have next to no wind, I think these players are going to tear up the golf course. And by tear it up, I think maybe a scoring average slightly under par would be tearing it up, right, around a PGA National, right? I would see at best, maybe we see something like a 1 under par scoring average because of how the conditions are. But by the time we get to the afternoon, it's not going to be a hard day around PGA National, but it's going to be a pretty typical one, right? With some afternoon breezes, what you get down here in Florida, a little bit more of a firm golf course as the day goes on and that sun, bakes out those greens. Tomorrow, I see a distinct advantage for the AM wave. And the reason why I point this out is if we go over here to the NAM model and then go over it on Friday, you'll see that it's a pretty flat, weather, right? You got winds in the morning. Your wind gusts and sustained winds are pretty flat no matter what hour we're looking at. You have a little bit of morning precipitation supposed to come through. I'll say that a lot of the local models aren't calling for that precipitation. So, take this with a grain of salt, but it doesn't look like nearly as optimal a day as what we have on Thursday. So for my lineups, right? For what I'm doing with my exposure, I'm slightly favoring that AM PM stack where I'm trying to take guys that are going off in those perfect conditions tomorrow because we know tomorrow morning is going to be scoreable, right? Like that is almost a virtual certainty based on how close we are to lock, right? As we get closer to lock, the more accurate these weather forecasts are going to become. I mean, you've got sub 4 miles an hour for pretty much all of the AM hours. I would expect to see something under par in terms of a scoring average. Whereas in the afternoon, I think we probably see an over par scoring average. So if you're going to lead into anything for a DFS stack, right, it would be that direction. right? Those AM, PM guys. And in terms of my personal exposure, I haven't built my lineups yet. I plan on doing that as soon as we get off live stream here, but I'll probably have 20, maybe even 25% of my lineups that stack that wave exclusively, right? That go out there, take some 6-0s. I might even mix in another 15, 20% that are at least 5 of 6s, right? Guys that are out there in the AM, PM stack. So I think there could be something, right, to try and take advantage of that weather. And based on the fact that I haven't seen many shows out there talk about it, I don't think it's going to be a very popular narrative, right? Like I was watching Rick's shows earlier. I don't think he mentioned that at all. The Mayo show, I didn't watch the whole thing. I don't believe that was brought up there either. It's going to be interesting, right, to see the ownership and whether there is, slightly higher ownership on those AM guys, or if it's a pretty typical week where the ownership isn't that skewed towards the weather. So that's something that I normally track. It's something that I look at every single week to see if people are going out there and playing that weather edge. And something that I've noticed for this start in 2024 is not a lot of people are playing weather edges. Like I felt like last year that was the thing to do. Almost everyone, on Twitter, like that was the talk of every week, right? Is like, what is the weather going to be and how are we going to play it? This season, like maybe it's because we haven't had the weather that would dictate that, but we've had 2.5 shot advantages already to start this year, right? So even when it doesn't look like it's going to be a massive edge, sometimes it just plays out that way, right? This was the PSA that I gave you guys 2 weeks ago when we had just a slight advantage. I said, you know what? If you're playing a lot of lineups, just take some, right? And play that wave and see what happens. We had nearly a 3-shot advantage that week, right? I'm not saying that is going to happen, right? Just like that week, I thought it would be like a half a stroke advantage, right? I see like a half a stroke advantage, maybe a stroke advantage here, right? If we were to really drag it out tomorrow, who knows though, right? Crazy shit happens down here in Florida. We have some of the most volatile weather. In fact, I wouldn't even throw it past it to the other wave to be the one that you have to have. So if there's a slate to go out there and lean into that weather, it's this one, right? Whether you see the same kind of edge that I do tomorrow, right, that we've gone through here, or maybe for some reason you think the PM AM stack's the way to go. It's probably not my favorite way to build this week. It's not how I'm building my lineups, but if you want to take that calculated gamble, then I couldn't completely shit on you for it. Let me just say that much. So we'll leave the weather there, the golf course stuff there. If you have any questions about what I saw today, just let me know. In terms of players, I guess we'll just do this now. I'm going to bring up the DFS sheet. I saw a few guys out there today, but nothing that notable. So I'll let you know what I saw. Nothing that's going to make you want to play a guy or not play somebody. But there's a few guys that I saw that were striping it. That's for sure. My winning score prediction is 18 under. So I think they're going to get after it this year. The softer greens, relatively low winds. In Florida, a lot of times we see 15 to 20 mile an hour winds. I think, like 18 under, especially with like Rory in the field. You never know. What's going on, Michael Pepe? Let's win some money. Cheers to you on that. I got my coffee here. Coffee for me tonight because I got to build my lineups. You're feeling lazy and don't want to make lineups. Send me yours. You want to be rich like me? Hey, if you're trying to tail my exact lineups, it's going to go worse a lot more than it goes right. So that's the kind of GPPs that I play. So even if I were to send you those, I have no interest in that. There's zero chance in hell that I would do something like that. You would probably lose more than you'd win. That's just how it works in DFS. Need that W this week. Luke last week was so. Yeah, I don't have a great week every single week. That's DFS, man. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. And if you need that W, then go somewhere else because there's no guaranteed things here in DFS. Just want to PSA for anyone out there, right? Thoughts on Matthew Pavon? Been terrific form for months. If you count his DP World Tour form, exactly, right? Going into last year, finished really strong. Only worries that he hasn't played since Pebble Beach. Yeah, it took some time off. Wouldn't surprise me if he came out, a little bit flat, right? You take some time off. I'm sure he celebrated. I'm sure practiced a little bit, right? These guys don't just completely take time off. I could see it, right? He's a decent play. You've seen Europeans play particularly well at this course. Maybe not so much over the last 3 years. You've had some Europeans that have played well, but if you go back historically, especially the 2010 range, 2010 to 2020, a lot of those Europeans were winning and finishing top 5 here. So there's precedent to that. I do have to say, though, it does worry me that he hasn't played much. Am I worried about the PM guys having to play the Bear Trap Friday PM? Not so much. No, it's a 3-hole stretch. Not worried about 3 holes. Red the Rough is down this year, bombs away. I think it's a little bit down, but it's never long here. That's the one thing I'll say is I saw reports saying that the rough was a different length. It looked the same to me. I mean, it's usually hardly even a thing, right? It's normally like 2 inches at most, and that's what I saw today. Or is the out of bounds keep it in check? No, the out of bounds matters. And the water in general, right, makes it happen. You made you belly laugh? Yeah, there you go. Like I said, if you're tailing me, bro, last week I think I made back like 40% of my money. So yeah, let's get rich off losing 60%, right? Thoughts on Billy Ho? I think he's a great play this week. So this is a perfect segue. So we're going to talk about a few players I saw out there. We'll talk about, whether I thought they were playing well or not. But yeah, Billy Ho is a perfect play for this kind of week. And there's a couple of reasons for it. First off, he's way cheaper than he should be. In fact, I couldn't even find him there. He's there at exactly $7,000. He's an AM wave golfer, right? And if I think there's a slight advantage there, little extra brownie points, right, out there for Billy Horschel, I suppose. But what I like about it is that he plays well on Bermuda grass, right? That has always been a thing for Billy. He's also played well at courses that are much more about precision over power. Now, this isn't a course where it's a bomber's paradise. It's also not a course where it's a short hitter's paradise, right? It's a pretty average track, but we get him on Bermuda grass and his form, and I actually had to look into this before I actually clicked him as a yes, right, into my player pool. It's been a lot better than I knew, right? He's gaining in both ball striking categories. He's gaining close to 3/4 of a stroke per round with the putter. That's very typical for Horschel, right? One of the best putters in the world. But this ball striking, which was dreadful, like all of 2023, like the entire year, this guy was absolute horseshit. It's finally back, right? And weaker field events, so take it with a slight grain of salt. Like he's not playing in elevated fields, right? Because of how shitty he's been playing. But at the same time, he's still gaining, right, in some of these PGA Tour events. So yeah, I think Billy Ho's a sleeper play this week. Recent form rank, he's number 11 in the field. He has decent course history. It's not great around this track, but again, historically, his best finishes are on Bermuda grass. So I like that quite a bit. Let's see any other comments we go through here. Would I recommend making changes in current lineup construction if the player pool is about 65 p.m. a.m.? Yeah, I would. Yes. I don't think you have to do anything crazy. I think 50-50 is just fine. But yeah, I have it the other way around, right? It's 65% AM PM for me. Rio Hisatune looks to be like a good each way. You have 100-1 there. Okay. Won the Open de France in French National. The only thing I'll say is that he looked horrible in a few rounds last week. Like I know he's been making cuts, but he has those blow-up rounds. And blow-up rounds at other tracks, right, are normally because you're hitting it offline off the tee, not able to save par by scrambling. This week, if he's doing that same thing off the tee, it's water balls. It's out of bounds, right? So I'm slightly worried about that. I'm not huge on him this week, but he's a high pedigree player. Dang it, thought this was the cricket game you were trying to watch. What's going on, Alex? We got Dinger Bets down there in chat. You came in a little bit late, so I know you wanted to hear about the golf course, Dinger. Go back about like 25 minutes to the beginning of the live stream, and I talk about all that shit. But welcome on in, buddy. Hopefully you're having a solid Wednesday evening. Let's go through some of our plays here. So what I saw out there today was a lot of players on the range, right? I walked the golf course. They're pretty spread out because it's a pro-am. And if I followed a player right on the course, it was for like one hole, right? I mean, I wasn't seeing a lot of them. Who I saw on the range was Benny Ann hitting absolute piss missiles. So he had played his AM Pro-Am and was out there on the range grinding for like 2 hours. Some may say that that's a bad thing, right? Obviously, if you're playing that much, you're probably working on something. But he was hitting a lot of quality iron shots from what I could tell. So again, don't read into these too much, but Benny Ann I did see play quite a bit. And at least to me looked to be pretty decent out there. Let's see. A lot of these top-end guys I did not see. I saw Sepp Straka out there, right? I'm in his caddy. I only saw him hit one tee shot, so I can't really say much about his round. But what I can say is that he hit that thing right down the middle of the fairway. So that was good to see for my boy Sepp, who I bet outright after talking to his caddy. So you can see it's a protected bet right here. So on Hard Rock Bet, they'll refund you, at least for somebody on my tier on Hard Rock Bet, up to a $250 bet. They'll refund you if it goes sideways. So I put 250 on him at plus 4,000. So would be, what's that, 10 grand if he ends up winning? Or yeah, something like that. That'd be pretty sick. So hopefully he comes through for that sort of thing. Let's see. Who else did I see on the golf course? Honestly, not that many players. And I'm like scrolling through and I'm like, yeah, didn't see him. Saw Carson Young. He was putting quite a bit. So I don't know what to say about that. Maybe he is working on his putter. But he was on the flat stick on the green quite a bit. And there was a lot of amateurs on the green. So I'm sure that was quite annoying. Let's see. I saw Cameron Champ. Cameron Champ was doing his thing. He was getting ready for his Pro-Am round. So it was just, hitting balls on the range, doing his typical thing. Benny Ann had already played his Pro-Am round. So his range session was a little bit different than what you saw with other players. There were other guys that were just kind of coming in, right, doing their thing and then leaving. Benny Ann was out. He was on the range the entire time that I was at the golf course, right, which was like 2.5 hours. I don't know how to take that. The more and more I think about it, is like, that's kind of strange, right? That he was out there playing that much. And I also say that he was tweeting while he was on the range. I mean, he'd stop like after every few minutes. I feel like every time I walked past him, he was on his phone. I'd go on, check Twitter, and he'd have a tweet out like 2 minutes ago or something like that. So maybe he just would rather spend time on the range than at home just dicking around. But yeah, he was out there quite a bit. I'll say that much. Who else? Saw Gary Woodland out there, had quite a bit of fans with him. Looked fine, right? Didn't have any sort of brace on or any sort of medical equipment, which you like to see with Gary. Sometimes he has injury issues. Justin Rose was out there. He looked okay. CT Pan also was out there, but again, I saw him for like one hole at the very most. That's about it, guys. I mean, there have been times in the past, right? We've talked about players that I've seen on the course. Sometimes, right, they've been good reads. A few fades that we've made based on stuff that I've seen before. And then we've had the time where John Rahm, I think I said that he looked bad on the range, which he did. He looked horrible on the range at the API. And then he shot 9 under par in round one, which I think his odds after round one were like minus 200 to win that golf tournament. And then round two, he shot like +7. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? Obviously, that first round, he went out there and nuked it. But round two, it came around and he reared that ugly head. So we'll leave that for the course report. In terms of how we're playing DFS this week, with all that water, with all that OB, with the fact that this is one of the hardest courses to handicap on the PGA Tour, if there is chalk that you are not for certain on this week, fade it by all means. The chalk normally gets massacred at this type of golf course, and especially down here in like the 8 and 7K range. You know, if anyone's going to be like 15% plus owned, you better be damn sold on them to go out there and play them in lineups. I mean, there are even guys down here like Shane Lowry who, you know, I really wanted to play this week. You know, there are a few other guys down here in the 7K range like Svensson that I like really wanted to play this week. And now, you know, you kind of got to second guess it, right? Like for somebody up here who was it like Shane Lowry, like I'm not playing him because of some of that ownership, like a Benny Ann, right? Like you can't play all of these guys up here at 16 to 20%. Eric Cole, a JT Poston, like outside of maybe Rory McIlroy, Cam Young, these guys down here to Tom Kim, like ownership really matters, right? Like sure, a Russell Henley, a Cam Young, I'm maybe a little bit less worried about the ownership, but these guys up top, for full transparency, right? Just because I'm okay with playing a chalky Cam Young and Russell Henley does not mean I'm playing them. In fact, I'm not playing Cam Young or Russell Henley this week. So just for full transparency there, right? They're not guys that I'm taking, but I would be much more okay with taking chalk if it's up here on a 10K player, right? These guys that are studs, right? Like you're paying up for them for a reason. They're chalky because people want to spend all of their salary, right? Not because everyone wants to click on that name. Down here in like the 8K range, 7K range, though, it is just pivots galore. So worth noting, let's go through some of the chalk here. We already mentioned some of the chalkier guys down here in the 8K range. Up top, right, it's a Rory. I got at 25.3%. It's not outrageous ownership. So honestly, I think it's just fine for a Rory McIlroy. If you think he's a decent course fit here, if you want to bet on his long-term talent, then I couldn't, tell you otherwise, right? You're going to have the salary this week. Pricing goes the whole way down to $5,000 down here. So if you need to save that extra $1,000, $2,000 that you need for a Rory McIlroy, you take one guy down here in the 5Ks or even like a bottom end of the 6K range player. Like we have guys down here like Cameron Champ, Grayson Sigg that are normally like $7,000, maybe even $7,200 at these kind of golf tournaments that are now $6,100. Like, there are legit players, right, that now we can take at $6,100 that normally would be $100 over the minimum price. The result of that is having a lot more flexibility to take a guy like Rory. So that has probably tipped my hand onto whether I'm playing him this week or not. But he's got 25% ownership. So if you want to take a game theory pivot against him, I think it's a perfect spot, right? Just like a Cam Young. Like if there are guys up here that you don't want to play, then do it, right? You can try and leverage the field that way. A lot of times up top, I'll spread out my exposure, right? Like I'll go up here and, I'll sprinkle 25, 30% of almost all the 9 and 10K range. It's kind of the opposite this week, right? I'm going all in on certain players. I'm completely fading a lot of other players up top. just because of the volatility, right? Like, I know there are going to be guys that completely eject themselves from the golf tournament, and ideally, right, it's going to be a long shot to actually make this happen, right? Hopefully I take the guys that are in contention and the other guys miss the cut, right? I mean, that's blatantly obvious, right? That's what we want to do every week when it comes to PGA DFS, but there are going to be guys up here in this 10K range that miss the cut. In fact, I think last year I was going through and making my showdown sheet, and I need to automate this better. Speaking of, it used to be a lot worse when I had to go through and take the players out that missed the cut. When I was doing that for the Honda Classic, it might have been 2 years ago when this happened, it was like all but 3 guys from $9,000 plus that ended up missing the weekend. So like, just know it's that kind of golf tournament where like all of these guys up here could end up ejecting, and it could be like a Russell Henley, like Poston and like, of all people, like Minwoo, right? I love Minwoo this week, by the way. I'm playing him. But like, it could be like just like 3 random guys that make the weekend and a whole bunch of carnage. Like that could be a legit thing too. So it's a tough one up top, right? For me, I'm taking more of a polarized approach, right? You know, getting over the field on guys and then completely fading others. But there's I suppose, other arguments that could be made, right? With all the different like death traps that we have up here, with the fact that a lot of these guys are going to miss the weekend, maybe you do scattershot it, right? It just make sure you don't screw yourself with these 10K players. But I'm not taking that cop-out approach this week, right? I'm getting my leverage. I'm finding the guys I want to take a stand on. But I guess I understand the other side of that argument. In terms of chalk down low, Sepp Straka's chalk at 16%. Keith Mitchell, another past winner, right, 15.4%. I would say would be pretty chalky for this range. Now, they're not too out of line, right? They're like 4 or 5% higher owned than most of their peers, but that's still pretty significantly high, right? Especially if you were to compare like a Sepp Straka to a Rasmus Højgaard or Jake Knapp, right? They're like 3-4 times higher owned. Sorry, I say probably like 3 times higher owned, right? Rather than what we have with these 2 players, which is obviously not worth it, right? So I love my boy Sepp this week. I'm playing him. I bet him outright. A lot of it because his caddy's just a nice dude who watches my course breakdowns, which I thought was fantastic. Yeah, $8,600. Okay, whatever. If you're going to take a piece of chalk, right, just don't make it all the chalk, right? Pick a few pieces that you're going to get over the field on, and try and avoid all the other landmines that are inevitably going to come. Like if you're going to take a guy up here, here's a good example. So leverage play that I like, right, is like Taylor Pendrith at $7,800. Probably a little bit too expensive, given the fact that he's been a little bit sour the last few events. He's 5.4% owned. Like if I'm playing Taylor Pendrith in lineups in my large field GPP, which I am this week, and I took him in like 12% of lineups, you know, that'd be leverage to the field. If he misses the cut, if he, you know, hits like 3 water balls, which he could, he's that kind of player, then I lose 12% of my lineups, right? It's like, okay, whatever. Like I took a leverage position and I lost. That's going to happen a lot this week. By the way, if you're getting ready to play DFS this week, you're going to have just a lot of guys that shit the bed. That's essentially what I'm talking about with all this volatility, all the water balls, all the out of bounds that are in play. You're going to have a lot of guys that shit the bed. So I have a few people in my Discord. Why I win, I know you're here in the live chat. Do not lock anybody this week. Like this is the week where you cannot be using somebody in all of your laps, right? If you're entering 2 or 3, then fine, right? Maybe you can lock somebody. If you're going with a small amount of exposure, if you're playing 20 plus lineups, the most I would have of any one given player is like 35%. And if you're going to play like a 25% owned Rory, right, that's going to be like at the top of that threshold, right? Like I'm going to be having to push that threshold to go out there and get leverage. You don't want to be at the top of your threshold on like every player down here in the 9K range, right? You don't want like all the guys you're taking to be at that 35% mark because just a lot of them are going to miss the cut, right? Even the guys that have a great course history, like a Daniel Berger, right, could easily eject and miss the cut. He's another piece of chalk that I'm playing, right? So there are a few of these pieces that I'm using in lineups, but just know that because so many of them are going to fall flat on their face, you can take leverage positions against a few of them and get a huge leg up on the field if you get it right. Down here in the 7s, we mentioned Svensson before. Any other like mega chalk? I guess Doug Gimmett, 10%, right? He's getting some ownership. Batia, who I still like, right? He's 9.2% owned. Down here in the 6 and 5K range, there's nothing, right? I mean, your highest owned players are like a Sam Ryder at 3.8%. Let's look at this 6K range. Your highest owned player would be like I guess Akshay, right? $6,900. But, you know, down further into the 6Ks, it's like a 6.5% owned Carson Young. So, you know, down to the 5s and 6K range, I think ownership is, I don't want to say non-existent, but pretty much, right? Like you can you can kind of play whoever the hell you want down in the 5s and 6s, and you're not going to have to worry about it too much. Maybe outside of Batia, right? He's the only guy, right? He's coming in at higher ownership. But like this 7-8K range, this is where you make the pivots this week, right? This is where you win or lose the GPP. This is where you take a lot of your big stands. And I know like people were asking a lot about Svensson before, like, but unless you really love him this week, like he's a player that you were loving on Monday. He was popping in your models. Maybe you bet him outright, right? You liked him that much. If you're not on that level of loving him, I just can't see playing him in 25, 30% of my lineups. But, I don't want to tip my hand too much, right? Maybe I do love him that much this week, but like that's how you should be treating all of these players. So for example, Christian Bezainhout. I was doing my course breakdown on Monday. Files corrupted twice when I was recording it, so that actually never dropped on the channel, which kind of sucked. That was a huge disappointment for me. But Bezainhout, if you would have seen that course breakdown, came up like 6 times. And in fact, he came up so much during the course breakdown that I told myself and told everyone during the video, if you would have seen it, that like I had to get exposure to him, right? That was before, and I thought he'd be low owned, right? I also thought he'd be cheaper than $7,600. Now he's like 10% owned. Like, and he's in the PM wave that I think is slightly worse than the AM PM wave. Like, then I'll go out there and pivot to my boys around him, right? Rather than taking Seabez. So, like, for example, Ricky Fowler's lower owned than Seabez, and they're pretty much the same price tag, right? $100 difference. Like, I'd rather take Ricky Fowler, right? If I'm taking somebody in that PM wave. So, the ownership this week, I think, especially in this mid tier, is where you're going to have to play the game. And it's where you should really be hunkering down on research, right? The one thing I'll say about this week is that ball striking form matters with all that water, all that out of bounds in play. You don't want a lot of your player pool in this range to be guys that are, not hitting the ball tee to green. The reason why I will take a shot on Ricky Fowler is the last 2 weeks, his approach play and his off the tee has been a little bit better, right, than we had during his down stretch. So let me point out a few guys that maybe aren't hitting it all that well. Ryan Fox, right? His off the tee form has just been horrible. I mean, even his approach form has been pretty dog shit. Not that he can't get there, especially because he's low owned. Like you could take him in 5% of lineups, get some leverage. I actually think that's a pretty good idea. In fact, after live stream and I'm building my lineups, there's a chance that I use him as a leverage piece and he ends up in my player pool. But for example, if Ryan Fox was like chalk for some reason, he'd be the most obvious fade in human history. Now, if we take a look at some of the guys that are chalk, a lot of them are guys that are playing well. But if you find anyone that has maybe a little bit of shaky form, like, for example, Olesen, right, who didn't have the best weekend last week, at 7.6%, it's not like he's overly high owned, but given his bad form, right, he should probably be like 1.8% or like 2-3% owned like a Ryan Fox, right? Much lower owned than 7.6%. I think that he's the kind of player you could look to for a fade. Let's find a few more here. So a lot of these guys up here are playing well. So there's not really anyone we can pick on. Yeah, at least from what I'm seeing, not a lot of guys up top that you can really pick on in terms of the form. Let's find somebody down here in the 6s. Get some coffee in me too. Yeah, I guess, yeah. All the chalk down low is on all the guys that are playing pretty decently. I guess CT Pan, right? CT Pan's not really doing shit. And he's 4% owned. Like, why is CT Pan like 4 or 5% owned? I know it's the course history, right? It's a few okay finishes around the Honda Classic, but 4% owned for a guy that's number 67 in form. Like, I don't quite get that one. Dylan Wu, right? 4.1% owned. He's only number 68 in the field when it comes to his recent form. Like, I don't necessarily understand that either. So there's a few interesting fades maybe down here in the 6K range to look at. Actually, I think I might be playing Dylan Wu. Let me double check that because Dylan Wu, he's an AM wave golfer, right? I think that's what I gave him the benefit on the doubt on. Let me double check that though, because I don't want to be slandering a guy that I'm actually playing. What's his price tag? I'm on my other sheet right now. I can't see it. So he's what? $6,100. Am I playing him? No. So he's not in my player pool, but I thought about it. So that's why I had to double check that. But now that we're looking at this, right? Probably not going to, that's why he didn't make my player pool, right? Was because of some of that recent form. If you're going to make fades, I think that's a good way to do it, right? Go through and find your guys to fade, but even players in form, right? You're still going to have to fade guys that are in form, right? You're still going to have to fade guys that are playing well of late because of just how volatile this event is, right? Like you're going to have guys that aren't playing well that go off, but like it's a weird week, guys. You have to play that game theory angle to get different or else you're just going to get massacred like everyone else if you're playing all chalk. Let's see what we got in terms of questions. If not, let's hop into the rest of this. Where are we at? A lot of questions. My bad. I know we went on a long tangent there, so we'll catch up on questions, then talk through some props and lineup construction. Did I see Seabez or T Monty? I did not, so didn't see either one out there. Live rundown later. I got you, Curtis. Hope you're doing well. I am not sick anymore. And yeah, I got you on that. There's actually a few props that I've entered that we'll go through too. What's going on, Samuel? You made it. There you go. Did I see any water balls? Not that I saw. From amateurs, I did, but not from tour players. Didn't watch that much golf, though, so not a huge sample size. Any Joe Highsmith or Alexander Bjork? I did see Joe Highsmith. I was looking for him for you, right? I know you mentioned that on Twitter. I only saw him walking into the clubhouse, though. And in fact, he walked like right in front of me. In fact, I actually almost walked into him while he was walking by. I was sending a text, and he was telling his caddy, he's like, oh, they have a back entrance here to the clubhouse. And obviously, because he's never been there before. So, yeah, only thing I'll say is I saw him in it. He obviously hasn't been to PGA National before. Bjork, I did not see out there. Thoughts on Zach Johnson to buy up more up top? It's an okay course for him. I think he's a good GPP play, right? I wouldn't do it in a single entry or a higher dollar contest, but if you're entering like the $5 GPP, you throw him in a lineup or two. Practice makes perfect, of course. What did I think about Jake falling off this week after winning last week? So I think that's the predominant narrative, right? Is that people think that he's going to fall off after having a shaky week. I'm not so sure it's going to happen, though, right? I mean, he did it with the ball striking. I'm not playing Jake Knapp this week. I'm a little bit more hesitant on his chances. So I guess I kind of am buying that narrative, but I wouldn't make that the reason that you're not playing him, right? The reason I'm not playing Jake Knapp is I like guys that are around him a little bit more, right? There are guys I'd rather get to than him, but that narrative to me is a little overrated. Maybe Fitz's poor form might be down to being distracted by his fiance. I think it's the POA. So I did a full breakdown on him, and I think it's a great could be the case too, right? Especially I've seen his wife. His wife's an absolute dime piece. So I agree with you there. One thing I'll say though is I did a full breakdown on it. Kind of putting the joke aside, and it's the POA numbers. Like his ball striking form is not as bad as what the numbers would say. It's like one bad event that's really hurting the ball striking stats. And then the last few events, the ball striking's been at least serviceable, probably not elite level like he'd hope for, but the putting has been horrible on POA. So we get him back on Bermuda this week. I like him. So maybe there's something to that narrative, right? Eddie Montgomery, didn't see him out there. Love, or does he, who's Love? Or does he spray it too much for this course? Oh, you're saying Montgomery Love. I see what you're saying. Gotcha. I don't know if anyone sprays it too much because, like, you have guys that are sprayers like Keith Mitchell, right, who have won this golf tournament. Heck, even Rory. I mean, he doesn't hit fairways for his life, and he's still gone out there. He's finished second. He's also won this golf tournament. I don't know if I'd say he sprays it too much, but I don't love him on Bermuda. For whatever reason, let me look at his Bermuda numbers. At least if memory serves me correctly, they're not as elite as what you have on other surfaces. So yeah, Taylor Montgomery, 0.95 shots per round. I guess it's slightly lower than some of his other surfaces, but yeah, I don't know. He's kind of just an average play for me. I don't hate him this week, and I just don't love him either. It's kind of a weird one. Cam Young to get his main PGA Tour win. It'd be a heck of a week, but I don't think so, honestly. He's not somebody that I considered for a win, but you never know. He's a talented kid. He can make it happen. That's for sure. You're ready for the Rasmus Payne. Yeah, he's a talented kid. So if you're trying to buy him early, this is the week. That's sick about Sep's caddy. It was he was standing to the side too. So Sep was on the tee box, right, getting ready to hit, and he was taking pictures with his pro-am group. His caddy was to the side. He's just like, I'm not dealing with this bullshit. Like you could tell, he was just like to the side. He's like, oh no, like fuck this. Like I'm just carrying the bag out here today. And I walked past him. And he's like, yo, and I'm like, it was crazy. I knew who it was. Obviously, I know these caddies. I know these players. I didn't think he was going to try and talk to me, though. You dodged a bullet in Mexico, ended up going Jaeger for one and done instead. There you go. Are we full sending sub? We are, Brant. And there you go, right? You sussed through it a little bit, right? You figured out it might be a little bit of a time bomb. But yeah, this week, man, this is what I was waiting for with Justin Suh, right? He's $6,800. He has pretty decent track record here, especially last year, and he's 4.5% owned. Yes, it is the week for Justin Suh, for sure. I know you. Absolutely why I win. So the LMAO was me telling him not to lock somebody this week. Yeah, don't lock them. Best 2,500 to 1 to have in equity. I don't even know who's 2,500 to 1. They probably all have about 0 win equity, to be honest. What's up, Luke? For one and done, you're down and looking for a low-owned guy. Okay. So looking for that game theory pivot, you're looking at Svensson, Bez, Lowry, and Mitchell. Who do I like? Who do I like the best? I don't know. Like, you're in one and done, right? So these guys are all going to be lower owned, particularly Svensson and Bez. Like, no one's going to use those guys in that kind of format. Bezainhout, just because ownership doesn't matter, right? The only reason I'm not playing him this week in DFS is because he's like 9-10% owned. But in one and done, he was checking a lot of the boxes I was looking for. So I would go with that. Yeah, C-Bez. I agree. Which of these outsiders do I like best? Between Norman, Young, Michael Kim, or Robbie Mack? I like Michael Kim the most. He's the only one that I'm playing out of those outsiders. But I think you're on the right track, right? Ball strikers, just high pedigree player, and a Robbie Mack. Vince Norman, a bomber. I looked at all four of those players. I'll say that much. I considered playing all four of them. The one that I went with was Michael Kim. Is it finally Justin Suh week? Thoughts on Luke List too? I think so. Yeah, I'm playing Justin Suh this week. And then thoughts on Luke List. He's got a good track record here. So surprisingly has played well around this track, which, he's got a ball striking skill set. I mean, that'll play well at any golf course. I'm okay with Luke List. It's not my favorite week for him, but it's certainly far from my least favorite week. Who are the good Bermuda putters? Well, it's crazy that you asked, right? We can go ahead and just sort this by Bermuda putting, and I'll show you all the best. How does that sound? So let's go over here, custom sorts, change it to the shots gained putting Bermuda, and then largest to smallest. Ooh, I've got merge cells in there, so we can't do that. Okay. All right, let's just go through it here. So Matt Fitzpatrick is one of your better elite tier players in terms of putting. You got Eric Cole up there in that category as well. Down here in the 8K range, Denny McCarthy, guys like Matthew Pavon are excellent Bermuda grass putters. The one thing I'll say about Pavon is that it's an extremely small sample size for somebody like him, right? Only a few rounds on the PGA Tour. Down here in the 7Ks, you've got Brendan Todd. Royal Hisatune, it's another small sample size as a DP World Tour player. So I would take that with a huge grain of salt. Taylor Montgomery, one of the better players in the world with putting. And honestly, like, I was mentioning this 0.95 before being pretty average for Taylor. It is, right? There are surfaces where he gains like 2 strokes per round to the field. He is that type of putter. Honestly, by the time that he's done on tour, he might have all the putting records in terms of shots gained putting. And I know it's a bold statement to say, but he is that good of a putter. Taylor Montgomery makes more putts than any player I've ever seen. You see him for a 15 to 20 footer for birdie, and you look at it like a 5 to 6 footer for pretty much any other player. How much of a better feel do you get for some of the golfers by watching them live? We'll get back to the Bermuda grass putters. Sorry, I got a little distracted there, but quite a bit, Sam. You can only see so much though, right? That's the issue. When you're watching online Shot Tracker or even watching the broadcast, you get to see a lot more shots from more players. But if you follow like one player specifically, you'll get a really good idea, right? Because you're not seeing all of those shots when you have the other coverage. But it's limited, right? You can only watch maybe like 3-4 golfers for their entire round in a day, or let's just say maybe like 2-3 groups of players. So maybe like, I don't know, like 8 to 10 players that you can see. On TV, you can see a lot more. You bet Novak for a top 20. Any thoughts on Mav? You've been riding him and he's still low priced. So I love the Novak one. I'm riding with you there. But any thoughts on Mav McNeely? I don't love the course fit, but I did see a few pieces of content that actually liked the course fit. And I didn't disagree with it. Like I didn't completely agree with it either. So I'm pretty average on him this week, right? He's 7.7% owned. If you're somebody who's, he's popping in your modeling, for example, then I'm okay with it at 7.7%. If you're looking at a top 20 bet, right? Like with what you took with Novak there, for example, it's totally fine, right? Like ownership doesn't matter. I think he's a pretty decent play. Again, I don't love him, but yeah, Novak play I love. It's should be a good week. Any take on Thorbjorn? For DFS, I actually feel like he's higher owned than he should be. He's up here at $7,700. I've got him at 7.6%, but yeah, not really a huge take in either direction there. Relatively speaking, full send, let's get it. Absolutely. Any chance Kirk goes back to back? For sure, there's a chance, but it's a extremely volatile course, so maybe not. So underdog and price picks content going away this week. Nah, I'll still be posting it for all my Patreons, but I can't play it myself. So there's a PSA that's going to go out about that. Yeah, they are ceasing operations completely down here in Florida. Only offering some of their, like DFS contests, right? Their draft contests that they do. But I'll still be putting out content for every single round. It'll be a little bit different. It'll be a list of props that I like rather than specific slips. But yeah, for you guys, it's not going to change. For me, it is unfortunately going to change, right? One of my main strings of income when it comes to playing DFS in general with my income is from playing pick'em apps. And unfortunately, I can't do it until they either legalize it down here in Florida, which I think may happen this year. There's either going to be a huge push from them to try and get back in operating, or someone's going to have to step up, right? There's going to have to be somebody like maybe Hard Rock Bet that starts offering the same thing. So the content's not going to go anywhere. I'm still going to continue to provide that, but hopefully there's some sort of avenue for me to start getting in my exposure. Hard Rock Bet actually reached out to them today. I'll show you guys on Twitter, actually, my DM with them. So let me go ahead, stop sharing, and I'll show you guys what they told me, because I reached out to them because I had concerns about being able to play and whatnot. And I'll show you what they told me. So I don't know if this is against rules, showing Hard Rock Bet DMs. And I said, I'm wondering if there's any word out yet if you guys will be offering like golf/PGA props in regards to like strokes, birdies, bogeys, etc. And then I was saying that there were DFS apps that were offering that down here, and now they're banned. It'd be pretty cool if you guys stepped in and took over that market, right? Essentially just asking them to give us the props that we were getting before. And I was like, plus it'll give you guys more action, whatever. And he said, we actually already have those, and they did last week. They had them for Sunday in particular. But he said, once the tournament starts, you should see a large portion of those for players in certain groups. They said a large portion. So last week, it was only Sammy Valimaki and Jake Knapp that you can bet on. But hoping that this is like legit right here, it looks like they're going to expand that product. So that's something that I went after, tried to figure out today, because obviously it's important for what I'm doing, right? Particularly if I want to continue to generate that kind of income that I have over there on the prop side. And looks like we might have hope from Hard Rock Bet right away. But I also think there's a chance that we have that legislation. I'm not going to talk about the politics of it, that potentially gives us those sites back at some point. So we'll have to see. Intriguing argument, but no content change for me. I'll still be putting everything out. If I had to punt with any 5K player, is there one that I prefer? So not off the top of my head, but I'll find one for you. I know Andrew Novak's probably the cop-out answer, but he is $5,900. Let's say you want to be even more bold about it, right? It's Joel Damon for me. So if you're really going to go down into the 5K range, the reason why I like Joel, I don't love the PMT time, but again, I'm still playing guys from that wave. It's just that I slightly prefer the AM guys. He's only 1.3% owned. And look at the recent form. It has been decent, at least, especially with the approach play. You'll see he's gaining both off the tee and on approach, close to half a stroke per round in each category. And he plays well at courses where off the tee matters and approach play matters, right? And the putter's not great, but winners at this event, top 5, top 10 finishers, gain less strokes with the putter than at any other event on the PGA Tour, right? There is no other event on tour where the putter means less than what you're going to have this week. So I like that for Joel. Right, Joel has not been playing well, right? That's why he's $5,500. I mean, that is a tough scene for him out there. But it might be a week to buy in on the bucket hat. Better GPP play, is it Billy Ho or Ricky? It is Ricky for me. You're going to pick -19, won a free month, but you don't know how to get touching me. Message me on Twitter. I got you, Kevin. And I didn't know that. I didn't check, so I probably should have done that. But reach out to me, man. I got you. I'll send you the information on there. It'll be easier that way. And my DMs are open, by the way. So if you go onto my accounts, right, sign into your Twitter, whatever, there'll be a little message sign. Just click that. You don't think Bermuda is Mav's favorite surface? Yeah, it's not. Let's see what Mav putts on the surface. So he, only gains about 0.3 strokes. Yeah, it's not his favorite surface. That's for sure. Yeah, I guess a reason not to play him, right, would be that. Will I be scared if your player pool leads to having more under 6K golfers than intended research-wise? So you're saying like if I ran a model, right, and like all of my top plays were 6K players, probably, right? That probably means I'm looking at like crazy stats that I don't need to. A little bit. That hat has to be up there with the top 3 for the Streamborn hats. Yeah, we got that one today. Appreciate that, Rob. It's from the Cognizant Classic. So it's the first piece of merch that I have from this golf tournament. And I snagged it on the way out today. So somebody appreciated the hat. Thank you. Kevin says, Alabama Senate, your state, just voted this week to put sports gambling on the ballot. There you go. Yeah, Florida, we ended up getting it this year. It's a huge change. And pretty sweet. Thanks for reaching out to Hard Rock. You're with there in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah, it was a problem for me. I figured it would be for other people, so I reached out. Playing any Pavon, I am not. So it's just ownership, right? It's also the fact that he hasn't played the last few weeks. He is in the AM wave. He is also a European, and Europeans have played well at this event in the past. But I don't know. I kind of feel like he's going to come back to earth. That's at least what I'm expecting this week. Could totally be wrong. I'm wrong a whole lot. As everyone is in this space, it's golf. It's one of the hardest things to predict. But yeah, not for me this week, Ryan. Let's at least leave it there. Let's talk through some lineup construction, and then we're going to go through props. And like I promised to Curtis before, I didn't forget about you. We are going to look at Live, right? That doesn't start until Friday. We're going to be doing a live stream tomorrow, so I'm sure we'll talk more about Live Golf, but we'll do it here a little bit too, just because you asked, right? I know you're here. So let's talk through some of this lineup construction this week, especially if you're taking that contrarian approach, right? You're not taking all that chalk. It's not a hard week to put together lineups, right? If you're starting with a Rory, it is going to force you into more of a studs and duds kind of approach, but I'm okay with that here. So if I am starting a lineup with Rory, I'm playing him this week. If you couldn't tell from what I was saying before, mixed in a little Minwoo Lee action, who I also really like this week. You still have $7,000 to work with, right? And how you rectify that, right? How you can go up here and still take another 8K player is by dropping down and taking your Joel Damon, right? Like I mentioned him as one potential target, but there are actually quite a few players down there in the 5K range that I'm playing. They're not my favorite plays, but it's not so much who you're buying, right? With that 5K price tag, it's a lot about what you're getting with that, right? And by taking somebody like a Joel Damon here, we can go up here and take another 8K player. Now, I probably wouldn't go like $8,900 and take like a Denny McCarthy, but if I wanted to play Justin Rose, for example, at $8,000, you can make that work, right? We still have 73.5 remaining for our last two spots. Heck, you could still even take a top end of the 7K player if you wanted to and have a more than viable enough lineup. So wanted to go through using Rory McIlroy because sure, you do have to punt with at least one of your 6 spots, but it's not crazy this week. Like just to give you a few other punts, like I'm sure we talked through a few here on stream, but like Novak, right, could have been that player that you used. Sam Ryder, I mean, he's far from somebody that, is a horrible player. Like he's very consistent on tour. He makes a bunch of cuts, right? Like you're okay with him at $5,900. Nate Lashley's been playing some pretty good golf. Jorge Campillo, right? He had a really good finish last week. Like maybe you take him at $5,700. I'm not playing Campillo this week, but if you just go through these, 6K range especially, there's a lot of strong players up here in the 6K range. You're going to have all the salary that you need. So, Aaron Baddeley, right? He's got a decent track record here. I know somebody mentioned him off the bat. You get down here, take a Grayson Sigg. He's a play that I really like this week, right? $6,100. If you want to take a more aggressive approach and take Rory, you're going to have the salary to make it work. So, and the added bonus is that all the guys down low, that 5-6K range, or in the exception of like 3-4 players, all essentially unowned, right? They're all essentially 2% or lower in terms of their projected ownership. So even if you take a chalky Rory McIlroy, you're almost forced to take a player that would override that, right? Would help your product ownership get lower. So that's why, and I said I'm playing Rory McIlroy. That's why I'm okay playing him, because almost by default, by using him, you're forcing yourself to get different, right, at another spot. So if you hate Rory this week and you want to take a stance against him, again, he's not my favorite player, right? He said a lot of stupid shit over the last few years. He's getting better over the last month or so, but I'm playing him this week, right? It's just the talent gap, right? And if you want to know why I'm playing him, I guess we'll have this conversation. He's the best player in this field, and it's not close, right? And if he's going to be like 25, 30% owned, then so be it, right? He probably should be by far the highest owned player in this field. And we've still got guys that are like 17, 18, 20% owned, right? Up here in the 9 and 10K range. So, Rory being 1.5 times that ownership mark makes sense. In fact, you should probably be like twice the ownership, right, of a lot of the other players up here. So that's how I would handle Rory lineups. If you're going to go more balanced, right, you just build your balanced lineup, right? Not much to say there. Like if you started Matty Fitz, maybe your second man in is a Corey Connors. Well, you can take whoever the hell you want, right? You can take a Straka if you want to take a except Straka's caddy. I forget his name now. You said it. God damn it. I'll have to look it up. I shouldn't be admitting that right now. He's probably going to watch this. But yeah, I shouldn't have admitted that. But if you take a more balanced approach, right, mix in my boy Sep, you take whoever the hell you want. It's not nearly as much of a pressing issue when it comes to salary, right? Especially if you like you took Corey Connors out of here, $7,600 remaining. You pretty much play whoever the hell you want to. So that's lineup construction. Not that much crazy going on this week. If you're going to play Showdown for tomorrow, only take the AM guys. Should be about a half a stroke to a stroke advantage. Let's hop over to props now. So if you were here just for DFS, I appreciate all of you guys here. Salute. Best of luck this week. Smash that like button before you hop on out of here and subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss rounds 2 through 4. But still prop content to come. So stream is not over yet. But I just know a lot of you guys, when we finish talking about DFS, hop on out of here. Couldn't blame you, right? If you're a DFS only player, best of luck to you this week. Let's see, any questions? Playing any props? I am. Or sorry, Pavon's what you said. What am I talking about? Going too quick right now. Any love for Ricky? Yes. He's won here before. He's played decently, even when he hasn't won. Decently low owned too, because of the form. So I'm okay with it. Any Cootie love? Not for me. They did both play decently here last year. Thank you for the tips. Of course, Kevin, best of luck this week. Rory to live rumor would be hilarious. I saw that. He kind of played into it today. It would be hilarious. If he ends up going, I think the reported number was $950 million. How could she say no to that, by the way, right? If they actually did offer him $950 million, there's no way in hell I'm saying no to that. In fact, I mean, if I'm a lower tier player, like some of the guys like Hudson Swafford and whatnot, they offered me 15, 20 million, whatever they offered them, I'd be running to take that. 950 mil? Jesus Christ. Yeah, you're taking that. Ryan Minion says, thoughts on Glover? I think it's a good course fit for him, and he's played well here in the past. So let's try and keep it on the down low there, right? Don't go telling too many people about Lucas Glover this week, because he does need to be low owned, right, to have that utility, but is a good course fit. So I like it. Let's talk some props. So if you have any questions about players, DFS, you can still ask them down in chat, right? Don't feel like you can't ask those questions. But now we're going to turn our focus over here to the prop side. So I actually wanted to take a look and see if they posted these pin locations yet, because yeah, they did 45 minutes ago. So there we go. We do have pin locations to work with, and I just want to skim them a little bit. So I don't even need the overhead views. I know this golf course well enough to just look at the overhead view and know what we're working with. So hole 3 is a par 5. It's a front pin, so that's good. Hole 4 is relatively easy. Par 4, it's like a center pin location. Okay, hole 5 is a tough par 3. It's tucked near the water. So holes 1 and 5 look tough. Holes 3 and 4 look easy. Hole 6 is a pretty average pin location on a really difficult hole. Hole 7 is a long ass par 3. It's also a back pin. So yeah, we're getting the PGA National that we want. We're getting 3 and 4 are going to be scoring looks. You're going to be looking to try and make birdie for sure at 3, maybe even at 4. Holes 1, 5, 6, and 7 are going to have like a 25, maybe even 30% bogey rate. Hole number 1, because it's short, probably doesn't have that kind of bogey rate. But yeah, these other ones, like 5 through 7, are just going to be an absolute brute. So that'll be fun. Hole 10 is going to be that par 5, right? That's been changed. This front right pin location is going to be easier for birdies, but you're probably not going to see a whole lot of eagles there. Hole 11, okay, front pin does bring in that water a little bit. Hole 12 in that back right is a pretty average pin. Hole 13, again, pretty average pin location. It is a back pin, but it is not that close to some of the edges. 14 is tucked away from the water, so that's going to help some of the players. Hole 15, though, is tucked directly on the water. 16, the second leg of the bear trap, looks like an average pin. 17 is an absolutely devilish pin. And then 18 is your par 5 finisher, is an easy pin, right? So the par 5s look like they're set up for scoring, right? 3's definitely an easy pin. 18 is certainly the easiest pin location on the golf course. And then 10 over here is like a 6 out of 10, right? So I think you're going to see some decent birdie looks out there. A few other holes that are playing shorter, but they've got some just nasty pins, and it's only Thursday. I mean, 17, 15 are just like, wow kind of pins, and it's Thursday again. 5 is another one of those wow type of pin locations. We're going to get those early morning ejections is what we're seeing from these pin locations. So this is the kind of pin sheet that I would expect to see on Saturday, not for a Thursday. And I think you're going to have somebody take this place low. I think if you keep yourself out of trouble, you could shoot something like 6, 7 under par with this kind of setup. But at the same time, you're going to have guys that shoot well over 80 on this type of setup. So I love it. It's the PGA National that honestly I was expecting to see from the pin sheet, and they have not disappointed. Let's leave it at that. All right, let's go through some props. So on Prize Picks, they've bumped everything that I've taken. We'll still look at the board here in a minute, but we'll focus on Underdog, right? So with all the bumps over there, we try and find a little bit more value here. And I don't think they've bumped everything. They've bumped a few things over here, as they always do. But let's try and find a few that haven't moved. So my number one prop in terms of a fade on Underdog is going to be this under on Eric Cole. We'll talk about why here in just a few minutes. Let's find some of the overs that I liked. Let's see. Actually, we're going to make this a 4-man slip that we're going to enter. So actually, they bumped that Minwoo prop. I want to find another fade to mix in. All right, let's mix in the Rory fade. So we'll do that. So we got this Eric Cole under on fairways, which we'll mention these two here in a second. And then to make this a 4-man slip, I'm going to find 2 overs on morning greens. Guys that are going off early without any wins for overs on greens regulation. So let me find the guys that I took. So I know they bumped Benny Ann already, so we're not going to take a bumped prop. Kirk, I like, but actually I can't give away every single prop I'm taking. So let me shut up for a second. They bumped Jaeger. Where else? Who else did we take? It was Jaeger. Golly. Let me double check, boys. I can't remember off the top of my head. That's not good. I got a lot going on this week. We'll just say that. Okay, so yeah, Jaeger got bumped. I guess it was just those two. Okay, so we will take the other ones I was thinking about. All right, so yeah, one's going to be Kirk over 11.5 greens. Like you probably could have tell from what I was saying there. So let me go ahead and find that. And then the other is going to be Keith Mitchell that we're also going to take for an over. So where are you at? There's Chris Kirk. Oh, they bumped him to 12 too. Oh, lovely. And we took that like an hour ago and they're already bumping shit. So yeah, good shit. They didn't bump Keith Mitchell, so we can throw him in there. There's got to be one more that hasn't moved, right? If not, that's fucked. Let's see. Did they move this prop? Yeah, they did. Of course they did. We could take this under on Shane Lowry. Go ahead and throw him in there. So what we're going to do for this is go with a little 4-man slip. I would probably insure this if I was entering it myself. I have a lot of 2-mans in. I think I have 1 3-man slip that I went in for round 1, but these are 4 props that I like, right? So whether you want to split this up into 2 2-mans, maybe throw one of the unders on fairways into each slip, right? So that both of them are a little bit over a 3x payout. Do whatever your heart desires, right? But what I like about these props is that Cole and Rory McIlroy are well below accuracy drivers on tour, and the fairway average at this course is normally between 8.3 and 8.5 fairways per round, right? So they're projected an entire fairway over that average. And Rory last year was number 171 in terms of driving accuracy, and I believe Eric Cole was ranked outside the top 150 on the PGA Tour. So you have 2 guys that are projecting below that field average. And over here on Underdog, right, they've got them a whole fairway above that field average. So there's a lot of value to be had there. And just to give you the comparison, they have Rory up over at 8.5 on Prize Picks. And then Eric Cole, I don't even think they have Eric Cole up, or maybe they do. They've got him up in 9 fairways, actually. So even at this number, right, 9 fairways, I would be taking the under over here on Prize Picks. But with the fact that we can get an under at 9 rather than a push at that same projection, makes this an even better prop take. So those are a few props that I'm taking. Last year, Eric Cole went under this, and I believe all but 1 round. He had 1 round where he had 11 of 14 fairways, and that was in a second place finish, right? That was one of his better performances that he's had on the PGA Tour, right? Was in a playoff to go out there and win last year. And even in that kind of performance, right, only went over in 1 of the 4 rounds, right? So that's why I like it. And Rory, if you take a look at his performances here, he's only gone over this in like 25, 30% of his rounds. So another one that's a solid under. These 2 props, look at that. They bumped Rory over here on live stream. Let's see, did they actually move Rory, or did they just take it off? Let's see. No, so he's still up, so you can still take Rory. You might want to get this exposure in quickly, though. I'll go through these explanations as quickly as I can. Shane Lowry under 70. He's covered this in like 6 of his last 8 rounds, and those were at Cognizant Classics that were playing a little bit more difficult, right? He's going off early tomorrow, so has an early morning tee time. 7:29 local time over here. We'll be playing in the lowest winds. If you're just joining us, didn't see the weather forecast from before, in the morning, we've got like 6-mile-an-hour winds at the very most. So it's going to be as scoreable as we see all week. The fact that they have slightly more receptive greens in the morning, also more pristine greens without all the footprints on them throughout the day. should lead to a lower scoring average in the morning. So I mentioned that we're going to see a slightly under par average. I think it might even be a whole half a stroke under par in terms of a scoring average. And if we get that half, stroke under par scoring average, Shane Lowry is going to have to gain a half a stroke to the field to cover. And at this event has an elite level course history. In fact, just to give you his exact finishes here, let's go through them. So he went T5 last year, second the year before that. So 2 top 5s in a row. Year before that, T36. And then the year before that was a T21 finish. So he's gone 4 straight made cuts, which is extremely rare for players at this event. So has a little bit of affinity for going low. And like I said, has covered this in 75% of his rounds over the last 2 years. And then the last prop I took was this Keith Mitchell over 11.5 greens. He has been absolutely striping it with his irons over the last few events. Honestly, the last few months, Keith Mitchell's been really strong on approach. And at 11.5 greens, that's essentially what I'm expecting the average to be. And let me bring up these averages. I always forget to do this with Bet the Number. So let me do that. I got to kind of remember to do this more. With Bet the Number, we got all the averages for the Cognizant, right? So, of course, this is a partner that we've had on the channel here in 2024. Check it out if you haven't already. It's a huge golf database that has way more detail than you're going to find at pretty much, well, honestly, it's not pretty much on any other site out there. You're going to get more detail over here on Bet the Number. But you'll see the green and regulation average was 62.9%, which is normally right around 11.3 per round. I mentioned that I think the average is going to be 11.5 or more per round because of the change at hole number 10, right? Hole number 10 is now a par 5 as opposed to the hardest par 4 on all the PGA Tour. So you're going to be having a lot more greens in regulation there. Instead of having to hit a 230-yard approach to a pretty tiny target, you can go up there, hit that same shot just short of the green or even around the green, and then hit a chip shot, right, and get that green in regulation. So I think it's at least going to go up by 0.2 per round. In fact, it might go up like 0.3 or 0.4 greens in regulation per round. On top of that, tomorrow morning, Keith gets the best conditions, right? He's also somebody that's been playing really well with the irons, and you can see why I have him projected for 12.5, right, greens in regulation per round. So there was an entire green difference with Keith. Shane Lowry, again, a player that's played really well here. And then these 2 unders on fairways are, again, 1 whole fairway higher than the average, despite both of them being well below average players in terms of their accuracy. And just to show you how bad their accuracy was last year, I know off the top of my head that Rory was exactly number 171. Don't ask me how I know such obscure knowledge, but let's see where Cole was, and I'll show you Rory while we're at it. That loser. Did I unplug my mic? Let's hope not. If I did, that's just wonderful. Nope, looks like we're good. So he's number 163 on tour. So look at that. He's down there with Rory outside the 160 on tour. Rory, number 171 on tour. Like I promised you, it's these guys should not be projected above the average, right, when it comes to fairways hit. So that's the idea with those props. Those are a few guys I took over on on Underdog, I should say. Getting ahead of myself. Now for Prize Picks. The first slip we're going to go through is actually on the live side of things. So the golf tournament that they're playing this week is Jeddah. So let's go over here to Data Golf and bring up the averages from Jeddah. Last year, it played to a minus 1.88 scoring average. And then in 2022, it played to a minus 1.48 average. So played pretty easy, right? Nearly 2 strokes under par last year. Let's find, it's a really weird name. It's like King Abdullah Economic City. This is where they're playing. They're playing in this general vicinity. I don't know where the golf course is exactly. The overhead views here are just dreadful, right? They're not nearly as detailed as what we have over here in the United States. What I see, though, is this Friday forecast, right? So Live does not start tomorrow. It starts on Friday. This weather forecast is just fucked. I mean, look at this, right? 22 miles an hour sustained winds. 34-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Now, some of the other forecasts are a lot calmer, right? But a lot of them are calling for some substantial wind. I mean, look at this one, right? 22-mile-an-hour wind gusts. If it ends up being windy out there, like you saw for round 1 last year, the scoring average round 1 last year, right, was 1.5. Actually, sorry, this was 2022. If it's windy, it can play about 0.75 under par, right? Last year, round 1, right, played slightly harder than the last 2 rounds, only played 0.33 under par. So if you couldn't tell, right, it's a fade that I like over here for the live golf side. So the slip that I'll give you guys for that would be an over It's on Bubba Watson at 67.5 strokes. And then the pairing I took was actually a birdie better matchup where I took Terrell Hatton over Paul Casey. And if you look at the outright odds, right, Terrell Hatton is clearly a much better player than what we have with Paul Casey. And on top of that is also a much higher birdie percentage player. Paul Casey last year was in the bottom 20 birdie makers on the entire Live Tour. And considering they have guys that are like even borderline professional golfers that were at the bottom of the Live Tour last year, it's not really good company to have. Whereas Terrell Hatton was like a top 50 birdie maker in all the PGA Tour. So one right on the top half, one was on the bottom half of a lower tiered league. You have to think that Hatton would be the huge advantage, right? The huge favorite over a Paul Casey here. So I took him for the birdie or better matchup. Not normally my favorite category to take from the prop side, but when you have that big of a talent gap difference, you can get me to bite on a birdie or better matchup or two. So I took that. The over on Bubba Watson, right? If the scoring average, like even if it was 2.5 under par, right? We had on the top end of the spectrum there last year, that would be putting Bubba Watson at the field average, right? And with the fact that it looks maybe a little bit windy, also the fact that Bubba Watson is at best like an average player on the Live Tour is why I was taking the over on him. So speaking of, did he play this tournament last year? Let me see if Bubba was even in the field at that point. I feel like he was, right? I don't see him on here. So I guess he wasn't teeing it up, which is, again, a little bit surprised. Actually, he was, right? He did play here last year, but he finished tied for 40th, right? His best round last year was a 68, which once again would have been over this projection, right? At 67.5. I mean, he was 4 for 4 for the over last year. We might be getting slightly windier conditions right out there for Friday. Just has me thinking it has to be an over. So this is a prop that I would take, a little combination over there, and something that I took myself. In terms of PGA props, they have bumped everything. I guess I'll give you the ones that bumped, right? I had overs on Matt Kuchar and Keith Mitchell. They were both at 8 fairways, but they've both since been moved to 8.5. So, obviously half the reason for taking a player at 8 fairways is for that push equity that you're getting at that number. You're no longer getting that on those sort of props. So I had those two. I also had an under on Justin Rose at 13 greens regulation, which all three of them have been bumped by 0.5. So this board in general wasn't my favorite. There wasn't a ton of value that I was entering over here on Prize Picks. And because they're ceasing operations tomorrow, I took all my money out and just moved on from the board. So we'll see how my props do. I'll probably have more money to take out after tomorrow's round. But yeah, most of my exposure came over here in Underdog because the board was much more mispriced than what we had over here in Prize Picks. And the payouts are actually a little bit better, right? Because we can boost up some of these payouts over here in Prize Picks. Like no matter what we take, right, we're going to get a 3x payout. If I took an over on birdies and an under on birdies in the same slip on Underdog, right, we're going to get a significantly better payout, right? And just to show you what I'm talking about, right? We took like an over on Luke List, maybe an under on Hostler, but they're giving us 3.18x, right? As opposed to that 3x. So that's not necessarily a prop that I'd take, right? I was just clicking props at random to give you that example, but that is why I was favoring Underdog for what is unfortunately going to be my last day of exposure that I'm able to enter myself. As we talked about a little bit before, right, they're going to be ceasing operations down here, which does not mean I'm going to stop doing my content, but a little bit of a killer, right, for my own exposure, that's for sure. Let's see. Good luck, absolutely. Thoughts on Glover, we already did that. Any advantage to showdowns, to golfers starting on the front nine? Let me think through that because at least to me, right, that's not something that I've thought about before, but let me see if I can figure out what they're trying to do here. So hole 9, hole 8, I guess they're kind of birdie looks, right? If you started on the back 9, you're starting on an easy birdie look, then 2 kind of hard holes. You're finishing with a par 5 and then starting with an easier hole. I think I'd rather start on the... I don't think there's an advantage at all, actually. Because here's why, right? I was going to say, like, maybe you'd want to start on the back 9, right? So that you can get 10 and then 1 back-to-back, right? Because 1's only 368. Right? 18 is a birdie look because it's a par 5. But hole number 2 is not easy, right? So, like, 17 would have to be your birdie, and it's 170 yards. If you started on the front 9, right? I don't really see the advantage at all, right? Like maybe hole number 8 and 9, you can make a birdie on, but they're still 420 yards, right? They're not easy birdie looks by any means. Then you could get 10 to round it off. Maybe you get 9, right? And you bleed into number 11 over here. Now that again, right? It's 450 yards, right? It's like a very typical par four. I don't see an advantage this week, but good question. Sometimes there is that advantage. Any lived outrights, nothing that I took. So there's still a day until the event. So ask me tomorrow, right, on the round 2 stream, and I could probably give you a good idea. Rory was at 68 strokes yesterday. What's he at now? What, 68 and a half? 0.5 bump? That sounds about right, right? Him going up about 0.5 strokes. That would have to, you'd have to shoot 3 under par, right, to go out there and cover a 68 and a half line. That feels like where it should be for a Rory McIlroy, right? Probably going to shoot at least, right, 1-2 under par for most of his rounds. If he ends up having an exceptional round, right, gaining 3+ strokes to the field, that'd be covering that. So I honestly agree with that projection. Not too wild to me. Luke would be such a dog for cooking up a prize pick slip on stream. I'll try and find something, but there's a lot of it's bumped, to be frank. When talking recent form, what are the round numbers to look at? So I would look for recent form, 12 or last 24. Depends on what part of the season you're at. I look at last 12 this time of year because we've only had so many events right here in 2024. But in a few weeks, I'll be looking at last 24 rounds. So normally last 24. Any big names to miss the cut? So yeah, let's look at Hard Rock Bet, right? We'll do that. So yeah, if you're going to bet anything this week, I don't hate these to miss the cut props. Now, it's trying to pick the right guys, right? So if I was going to try and find guys to miss the cut, I would want them to be PM wave golfers, right? Because I think there might be, a slight disadvantage to playing in the PM wave. And I would try and find first timers. So there's not any first timers that they have up, right? All these guys, I guess Cam Young might actually be a first timer. Actually, no, he played here before one time. So yeah, none of these guys are first time players, but yeah, maybe it's a PM wave golfer that you just try and take a big number on. So I guess JT Poston would be my favorite to take for this. Benny Ann too. Maybe all that grinding on the range that he was doing was because his game's not the best. I don't hate the miss the cut stuff, but like these odds plus 220, plus 210, do your line shopping, right? Like make sure you're getting a good number on them. I have no idea if those are competitive. Let's see, any 3-ball stuff, nothing that I've entered yet. So there's a lot of 3-balls they have posted up here. I'll skim through them for a second, but I don't want to spend all day on these. There's just so many up, right? It's like hard to give you an opinion unless I've already done it. Unless we want to spend like a half an hour looking at them. But let me look at some of the bigger groups, right? Let's look at some of the super groups and I'll give you an idea. We're not going to look at like the shitty ones. So Tom Kim, Rose, and Fitzpatrick. You've got Rose at plus 260, then like plus 150 there. Yeah, I'm not going to touch that. If they had somebody like Fitz or Tom Kim at plus 200 odds, or at least closer to plus 200, I probably would have bid on that. But they've got both at plus 150, so I'll stay away there. Let's see, Sanjay, you got Fowler and Straka. You got Straka at plus 160. Once again, like if that was plus 200, I probably would have taken it, right? But Fowler at plus 240, I'll probably stay away from. Berger at plus, see, this is one I'd take, right? So I want somebody that I feel has at least, an average chance, right, to go out there and win this, like at least a 33% chance to go out there and win this group. And Berger against Henley and Cole, like I know they're all quality players. He's just as quality as the other two. So for now, let's leave Berger in there. He's probably the one that I would actually enter so far. And in fact, probably will enter. Let's look at a few other of the groups. So you got Cam Young versus Batia and Dunlap. This is another one, right? I would take Akshay out of this combination. You're getting closer to the plus 200, which would be that 33% implied odds. And Dunlap, right? I mean, he's a great player, great kid, but it's his first time at this golf course going against a volatile Cam Young, right? A player that has a lot of extremely wide range of outcomes is probably the best way to put it. So yeah, I would consider those two. So you got Knapp versus McIlroy and Kirk. I'd probably stay away from that one. I'm not betting Rory at minus money, right, in a 3-ball kind of situation. Yeah, let's go with those two. These would be my top 2 ones. I believe what is Henley, Cole, Berger, they're PM, right? Same thing with this other. Actually, this group's AM. Maybe I place this bet and I follow them tomorrow, right? I'm going to follow my boy Berger. He's one of my favorite players on tour, so he'll definitely get some action tomorrow. And I kind of want to follow this Dunlap, Batia, Cam Young group. So we'll see. I'll probably end up entering these after we get off live stream here, and wouldn't be the worst groups to follow either. Lanto Griffin just withdrew. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Good thing is it changes none of my plans, right? Wasn't using them this week. You said AM golfers for tomorrow is 5 too many or dial it down to 4. So I mean, I think 4 or 5 is fine, right? Kind of depends on who you're playing, right? I think that's okay. You could go all 6, right? I'm going to have lineups that have all 6. I'm out there with the AM wave. Forgot Mans is in Florida. Yep. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And they have also bumped a lot of shit too. So I took my money off of it. Can you play Hard Rock Bet if you live in Alabama but travel across to Florida? I believe so. Yeah. You're going to have to get set up, right? So it's not like you can just go across the border and immediately bet. But yeah, I think so, Mark. Don't quote me on that though, because I'm not 100% certain. But I had friends that have visited down here, right? We're down here in Florida, so my family visits all the fucking time, as you'd expect, right? In a travel destination. Yeah, they bet all the time when they come down here. So yeah, it's a thing. You got to get it set up when you get down here. It's not instantaneous process. And see, let's look at Prize Picks. I want to give you something, right? I would not take the bump shit, right? Like I mentioned the Keith Mitchell, the Kuchar props before. They got bumped, right? Don't touch that shit. Just probably not worth it. Like even this Eric Cole prop, right? Like I wouldn't take him at 9 when you have him available at 9.5 underdog, right? So probably not the best prop. Yeah, I don't have anything for you, man. It wasn't my favorite board to begin with, and I can't even enter it myself if I wanted to, unfortunately. That's all I've got here for the live stream, though, guys. I appreciate all the support here as per usual. Go ahead, smash that like button if you haven't already, and subscribe because we're doing the same thing for rounds 2 through 4. So I'll be out there on the course. It's going to take me some time to do my projections, but I do plan going live sometime in the evenings before each round. So it'll probably be at like 8:30, maybe 9 p.m. I'm going to need some time, right, to get back, get refreshed, get all of that analysis done, but still want to be able to cover what I saw out there from day to day and bring you guys the goods for the weekend. So should be an absolute cracker. I'm going to be out there all weekend. If you're out there at PGA National, please do not be afraid at all. Do not be shy. Come out there and say hi and go out there and maybe have a brewski or two out there on the golf course. I appreciate you guys. Best of luck with all your exposure, and I'll see you guys throughout the weekend.